The school bus came at 7:45. That was the fixed point. Everything else in the morning was organized around it. Bath the night before, clothes laid out on the chair, school bag by the door, and breakfast on the table at 7:15. Not 7:30, 7:15. Because 7:30 left no time to eat properly before the walk to the corner. I have talked to dozens of people who grew up in American households in the 1950s about what they remember from those mornings. Not the bus, not the walk. The kitchen. The smell of it. What was on the table when they sat down. And what they describe, without exception, across different states and different economic situations, is a version of the same morning. Hot food. Real food. Made from scratch in under 30 minutes by someone who had been awake since 6. This video is about what was in that kitchen. The problem with breakfast today. Here is something worth saying before we get into the food. The average American child today eats breakfast, when they eat it at all, in under 4 minutes. Studies on breakfast consumption in school-age children consistently find that the meals consumed are high in refined carbohydrate, low in protein, and low in fat. The blood sugar spike produced by a bowl of sweetened cereal or a toaster pastry peaks approximately 30 minutes after consumption and drops sharply 90 minutes later, right in the middle of the first period of school. The child sitting in a classroom at 9:30 whose blood sugar just crashed, is not a child who can pay attention. This is not a theory. It is documented in pediatric nutrition research going back to the 1970s. The 1950s breakfast was different because it was built, not intentionally, not based on nutritional science, but by the accumulated wisdom of generations of women who understood that children needed to function until lunchtime, around the specific macronutrient combination that produces stable blood sugar for 3 to 4 hours. Protein, fat, and complex carbohydrate together. Every single breakfast on this list delivers that combination. Not because anyone planned it that way, because it was what real food naturally contains. Before we get into the actual breakfasts, subscribe and leave a like. Every day on this channel, we cover what American grandmothers understood about feeding families that the convenience food industry spent decades teaching us to forget. Hit the bell. Let's go into the kitchen. The oatmeal that was not instant. The pot went on before anyone came downstairs. Not the packet. Not the 1-minute cup. The rolled oats from the cardboard canister, Quaker, red lid, on the pantry shelf, measured into salted boiling water and stirred for 5 minutes over medium heat. 5 minutes. That was the entire active cooking time. What came out of those 5 minutes was not the same food as what comes out of the instant packet. Rolled oats cooked on the stove have a texture, slightly chewy, with a thickness that holds on the spoon. That instant oats, which are pre-cooked and then dried and therefore have nothing left to absorb, cannot replicate. The oatmeal was served with one of 3 things depending on the household and the morning. A pat of butter melting into the surface, a small pour of whole milk, or a spoonful of brown sugar or molasses. Not all 3. 1. The combination. The slow-release complex carbohydrate of the oats, the fat from the butter or milk, the small amount of sugar for palatability, produced a breakfast that provided stable energy for 3 to 4 hours. A child who ate oatmeal at 7:15 was not hungry again until well past 10. This is why it was on the table. Not because anyone knew about glycemic index, because it worked. Before we continue, if this is making you think differently about what breakfast can be, subscribe and leave a like. The most interesting breakfast on this list is still ahead. Scrambled eggs with whatever was in the pan. Eggs were not a weekend food in 1955. They were a Tuesday morning food. 2 eggs per child. cracked into the same cast-iron skillet that had made last night's dinner, reheated with a small amount of butter. Scrambled over low heat with a wooden spoon, not whisked in a bowl, not beaten with milk, just cracked directly into the pan and moved slowly until just set. 2 minutes. What went into them depended on what was in the kitchen. A slice of yesterday's ham, diced. The end of a block of American cheese, torn into pieces and folded in while the eggs were still wet. A spoonful of the leftover vegetable from the previous night's dinner. This was not a recipe. This was the reflex of a cook who understood that a hot pan, 2 eggs, and 3 minutes produced a complete protein breakfast for a child about to sit in a classroom for 6 hours. The egg was not feared in 1955. It was understood. An egg contains everything needed to build a new organism. Every amino acid, every essential fat, vitamins A, D, E, K, B12, choline. The nutritional profile of a single egg is extraordinary by any measure. We spent 30 years being told to eat less of them. The research that drove that recommendation has since been largely revised. The 1955 breakfast table was right about the egg the whole time. Toast from real bread with real butter. The bread was not low-calorie. The butter was not margarine. 2 slices of sandwich bread, the standard Pepperidge Farm or Wonder Bread of the era, which was real bread made from wheat flour and yeast with a short ingredient list. Toasted in the chrome toaster on the counter and buttered immediately while hot, so the butter melted into the surface rather than sitting on top. The toast with real butter was not a treat. It was infrastructure. It completed the meal, added the additional calories a growing body needed, added the fat that slowed the absorption of everything else on the plate, and gave a child something to carry in hand on the way to the door when the clock said 7:43 and the bus was 2 minutes away. The margarine that replaced the butter in many households through the 1960s and 1970s, sold as a healthier alternative to saturated fat, contained trans fats that the FDA would eventually classify as not safe for consumption. The butter it replaced contained saturated fat that the body metabolizes cleanly. The 1955 table was right about the butter, too. Cream of wheat on cold mornings. From October to March in most American households, the oatmeal had a competitor. Cream of wheat. The red and white box. Poured into boiling salted water and stirred for 3 minutes. Served in a wide bowl with butter and a small amount of sugar, or with warm milk poured over it. Cream of wheat is semolina, coarsely milled wheat. Its nutritional profile is similar to oatmeal in terms of its effect on blood sugar. Slower release than refined flour, stabilizing through the morning hours. It is also iron fortified, which made it specifically appropriate for growing children. The taste is milder than oatmeal, and the texture is smoother, closer to polenta, nothing like the gluey consistency of instant cream of wheat, which is ground finer and behaves differently in the bowl. A 3-minute breakfast that provided iron, complex carbohydrate, and sustained energy. From a box that cost under 50 cents in 1955. We stopped buying it when cereal took over the breakfast aisle. The cereal provided faster preparation, more sugar, and a marketing budget that cream of wheat could not match. Not better nutrition. Just faster and more heavily advertised. Pancakes on Saturday morning, and why they mattered. Pancakes were not a daily breakfast. They were the Saturday morning breakfast. The distinction matters. The pancakes appeared once a week because they took 20 minutes instead of 5, required a specific pan, and produced dishes that needed washing before the rest of the week's work began. They were the signal that today was different, that nobody was rushing to a bus. The batter was simple: flour, baking powder, salt, an egg, milk, a spoonful of sugar, a tablespoon of melted butter. Mixed in a bowl, not overmixed, just combined, and poured onto a lightly greased griddle over medium heat. The critical technique, waiting for the bubbles. The batter goes onto the hot griddle, and you do not touch it. You watch. When bubbles form across the surface and the edges look set, not wet, set, you flip once. One flip. The pancake that gets flipped multiple times is a compressed, dense, sad version of what it should be. Real maple syrup if the family had it. Butter always. The Saturday pancake was not a nutritional event. It was a cultural one. It was the breakfast that said, "We are together this morning, we have time, and this table is the reason we are a family." That function, the meal as a shared ritual that marks a day as different from the others, is something the 1950s family understood instinctively. We have largely replaced it with individual schedules and individual food choices, and the quiet loss of the specific comfort of a Saturday morning that smelled like butter and maple syrup. Soft-boiled eggs and toast soldiers. This is the breakfast that most people under 40 have never made, and most people over 60 remember with something close to physical longing. An egg lowered carefully into already boiling water. 6 minutes exactly, not 5, not 7. 6. The yolk at 6 minutes is jammy, not fully set, not liquid. It holds its shape when you break the shell, but yields to a piece of toast. The toast cut into 4 long strips, soldiers, for dipping. The mechanics of this breakfast are what make it memorable. You break the top of the egg with a spoon. You dip the toast soldier into the yolk. The yolk coats the toast. You eat the toast. You eat the white with a small spoon. This is a breakfast that requires attention. Not skill. Any timer can count to 6. Attention. You have to be present for it. You cannot eat it while looking at a phone because it requires 2 hands and it gets cold quickly. The forced presence of the soft-boiled egg breakfast may be the most underrated thing about it. It is a meal that demands you be at the table, engaged with what is in front of you, for the entire duration. That engagement, with food, with the morning, with the people at the table, is what most modern breakfasts have engineered away entirely. Fried potatoes from last night's leftovers. This breakfast appeared when there were leftover boiled potatoes from the previous night's dinner. Diced. Into the cast iron skillet with bacon drippings or butter over medium-high heat. Pressed flat with a spatula. Left alone for 4 minutes until the bottom was dark and crisp. Flipped in sections. 4 more minutes. Salt and pepper. A fried egg on top if there were eggs to spare. This breakfast cost essentially nothing because the potatoes were already paid for. The 4 minutes of active cooking produced something genuinely delicious. The crisp exterior and the soft interior of a potato that has been cooked twice, the second time in fat, is a specific pleasure that no prepared product replicates. It also taught a lesson without teaching it. That yesterday's food has value. That nothing should leave the kitchen until it is given everything it has. That the cook who sees a bowl of leftover boiled potatoes sees tomorrow's breakfast. That way of looking at food, every ingredient with a next purpose, is the habit that made the 1950s kitchen work financially and culinarily simultaneously. What the cereal replaced and what was lost. I want to be direct about this before the closing, because it is the point of everything I have described. The cold cereal revolution happened between roughly 1955 and 1975. Kellogg's and General Mills and Post spent hundreds of millions of dollars convincing American parents that a bowl of sweetened corn or wheat product with milk was equivalent to a cooked breakfast. The campaigns specifically targeted mothers who were entering the workforce in larger numbers and who needed fast breakfast solutions. The speed was real. A bowl of cereal takes 2 minutes. The oatmeal takes 7. The eggs take 5. The nutritional equivalence was not real. A bowl of sweetened cereal provides rapid-release carbohydrate, minimal protein, and almost no fat. A bowl of oatmeal with butter provides complex carbohydrate, some protein, and fat. 2 eggs with toast provides complete protein, substantial fat, and slow-release carbohydrate. The physiological difference in a child's blood sugar and therefore cognitive function 3 hours after each breakfast is measurable and has been measured. We did not stop making these breakfasts because they stopped working. We stopped because we were sold a faster alternative, and because the institutional knowledge of how to make a 7-minute oatmeal or a 5-minute egg was not transmitted when the cereal replaced them. The cast iron skillet is still on sale. The rolled oats are still on the shelf. The eggs are still at the grocery store. What requires recovery is not the ingredients. It is the reflex, the understanding that the 7 minutes between 6:50 and 7:15, repeated every school morning, is the most important cooking of the day. I keep coming back to one specific detail from every conversation I have had about 1950s breakfasts. Nobody I have spoken to remembers the brand of the oatmeal or the specific recipe for the scrambled eggs. What they remember is that someone got up before them and made it. The food was evidence of something, not of nutrition knowledge or culinary skill, of the specific, quiet, daily commitment that says, I was here before you needed me to be, and the table was ready when you arrived. That commitment, getting up before the children, putting the pot on, having something hot on the table before the bus came, was not discussed as a sacrifice or a virtue. It was just what happened every morning, without announcement. The children who grew up at that table grew up understanding, without being told, that they were worth the effort. That is not something a box of cereal communicates. 7:45 was the bus. 7:15 was breakfast. Hot food, made from scratch. On the table when you came downstairs. Oatmeal that took 5 minutes and kept you full until 10. Scrambled eggs with whatever was in the pan. Toast with real butter. Cream of wheat on January mornings. Saturday pancakes with 1 flip and maple syrup. Soft-boiled eggs and soldiers that required you to be present. And fried potatoes from last night's leftovers that cost nothing and tasted better than anything purchased. None of these required a recipe. They required a cast iron skillet, a pot, some eggs, some oats, and someone who got up before everyone else. Tell me in the comments what you remember eating before school. Not what you eat now, what you remember. The specific thing, the smell of it. Who made it? Like the video if the Saturday pancakes brought something back. Subscribe for more of this every day. Grandma figured this out before breakfast.